For more on the talks between the Israeli and the Palestinian delegations, I'm joined by Matthew Brodsky. He's the policy director at the Jewish Policy Center here in Washington. Matthew, welcome to the show.
Good to be back.
I remember talking to a Republican lawmaker here in Washington who's retired, and he said the only way you can get things done on Capitol Hill between the Democrats and the Republicans, you start at the center where you can find some agreement and you kind of move further and further out. And it's painful as you get further out.
Right.
Is there a center, is there an area where they can begin? Because there's so many deaths, distrust, disagreements over decades.
Right.
How do you start there at the center? Where is that center?
Well, there are certain core issues, definitely, that make up what the contours of a final status solution, which is what they're looking to achieve are. And that's borders, security arrangements, it's refugees, it's the character of whether Israel be considered a Jewish state, and what Jerusalem would be. The easiest thing to focus on right now would have to be borders, because that is something that is more, it's something more tangible. When you get to having Palestinians agree that Israel should be a Jewish state and should remain so, that becomes a much more thornier problem for them. And this is likely along the lines of where the peace talks will falter as we go on. But the borders would be a great starting point, and confidence-building measures, just as you suggest, is very important, because the polling indicates that both sides want to have peace talks, but they don't believe that the other side is willing to make the concessions necessary to make peace, and that has been, the result of what we've seen for the past decades.
And you've got constituencies on both sides, the more radical elements that are drawing both sides in the opposite directions, one would think, too.
Yeah, I mean, Hamas, for instance, which is, they're running Gaza Strip right now, and that's basically, not the Palestinian Authority. They're opposed to any peace or recognition of Israel to begin with. So how to get around that in the end is, it's hard to tell how that would happen. And whereas you may have elements that are more right-wing in Israel, or even within the coalition, there's no sign of that coalition cracking. And even if the coalition did crack, Netanyahu would probably be able to put a coalition together with labor. So, I mean, I would say it's a lot more thorny if you have two authorities within the Palestinian, the Palestinian people, the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, Hamas in Gaza. That's a lot different than a more democratically functioning Israel that has said and expressed that they want peace and a two-state solution.
President Obama's gone down this path before. I mentioned George Mitchell, the former senator from the North, and I have a sentence from a piece that Andrea Stone wrote when he resigned after hitting a brick wall. She said, "The only surprising thing about the resignation of George Mitchell as President Barack Obama's special envoy is that it took so long." The frustration aspect of this job, it is not an easy job. Why does Kerry think he has what it takes when so many others have failed before him?
Well, Kerry, first of all, from being at the head of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee for so long, I think that he really thinks that this is something that he could really take on. I mean, again, this is one of the thorniest issues in the Middle East, as you suggest, but I think that he knows the ins and outs. But I think too much is focused currently, and this is what he is about to find out, I think, as we go forward, that it's not just about getting them to the table. It's not just about putting the two down to talk. The fact is, if one has a set of red lines that the other is not going to meet, and vice versa, then you're going to talk just to disagree. Israel's not going to negotiate over whether it has the right to exist. And that is a Palestinian position. So, is it going to be a Jewish state? Well, what is, there's no Israeli government that would say, no, we don't have to be a Jewish state.
We don't have a lot of time, but give me your level of optimism.
No one makes money gambling on Middle East peace, but I mean, they would have a lot of work to do, but it's hard to see how they get around the problems. The agreements that they had looked at that looked like they were close in the past, in 2000, in 2007, 2008, they're all fairly similar, but they weren't enough that Abbas or Arafat in his day would take the offer. So as long as the Palestinians stay in, there could be some progress along the way. It's really difficult to see how a final status solution comes now.
Matthew, thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you.